Hello again. We're now on to part 16 of our Varjak Paw, and when we just left him, he was back at the Contessa's house. He was with Holly, and poor Cludge, who really desperately wanted to help, had been stranded outside because of the wall, because dogs can't climb, and Varjak hadn't realised this. So let's see what happens when he's speaking to the family. Chapter 29. Varjak didn't tell the family about his dreams. He didn't think they'd understand that part, but he told them all about the city, the fights, the friends, the vanishings. It felt strange to tell his tale at last. It didn't feel real. It was more like a dream or a fantasy. The Mesopotamian blues, young and old, gazed at him, listening silently, captivated by his descriptions of life outside the house. By the time he got to Cludge, even Julius seemed enthralled. "Varjak's brought glory to the family," said Father when it was over. Varjak did his best to look humble, but it wasn't easy. "I always said he'd turn out well if we brought him up right," beamed Mother. Jasmine purred at him. Jay, Jethro and Jerome looked at him with new respect, but Julius just snorted. "That's a good tale," he said, toying with the gentleman's mouse. "Except it's only a tale, isn't it? I know you, Varjak Paw. I bet you were so scared you didn't do half those things." Julius's pupils narrowed. He puffed his fur out, making him look even bigger than he was. Varjak's throat tightened. A fight was the last thing he wanted at this moment of triumph. He looked into the fireplace. It was cold. "Yes, sometimes I was scared," he admitted. "But everything I said was true." "You scrawny little insect," sneered Julius. "Who do you think you are, coming back here and lording it up like this? You think we care about your stupid tales?" "Julius," cooed Jasmine in her milky voice, "I do believe you're jealous." Julius ignored her. "He's not even a proper Mesopotamian blue," he hissed. "Never has been, never will be." He flicked the toy mouse aside and stared at Varjak with green eyes full of contempt. "That's not true, Julius," said Father. "Of course Varjak's a Mesopotamian blue. Only a blue could do those things." "He's not one of us," growled Julius. "Eyes the colour of danger. Isn't that right, insect?" Something rose in Varjak's heart. His mind was catching fire. All those times Julius had made fun of him, made him miserable, made him feel small and weak. "Don't call me that," he said. "Insect," spat Julius. "I don't like it. I never liked it. It's what you are. Now come on, I'll squash you flat." Something snapped in Varjak. "All right," he heard himself yell. "Don't, Varjak," said Jasmine. "He'll kill you." Julius hissed at her. "Shh." She shrank back and was silent like the rest. Varjak's face was burning, but he had no choice now. He had to go through with it. Varjak and Julius started to circle each other, stalking around the Contessa's empty armchair. The family made a ring around them. Everyone was watching, silent with bated breath. Varjak breathed 1, 2, 3, 4 and dropped smoothly into slow time. Julius stared at him with scornful green eyes and bared his teeth. Varjak glared right back, bared his own teeth. Julius looked surprised. "Come on, Julius Paw," said Varjak. "Squash me flat." Julius lunged in. He was quick for a cat of his size, but Varjak was quicker, more agile, a moving circle of pure energy. He stepped aside. Julius bit heavily into space. His teeth cracked together. It sounded painful. "Don't ever call me insect again," said Varjak. Julius roared. He raked out with a strong silver blue paw. Varjak was too fast once more. Julius missed and lurched into the armchair. Jay, Jethro and Jerome giggled. Were they laughing at his moving circle? Varjak turned to see them giggling at Julius instead. He smiled, but as he looked away, Julius came at him and cracked the side of his face with vicious strength. Varjak staggered back. He hadn't expected that. It hurt. "Insect!" thundered Julius. "Now you've made me angry." He launched a flurry of claws. Senses reeling, Varjak dived away just in time. He had to keep breathing, keep the moving circle going, or Julius would finish him. He dodged the furious attacks that followed, becoming a shimmer that Julius couldn't quite hit. The attacks grew wilder, angrier. Varjak stayed a step ahead, just out of reach, as his big brother closed in, until Julius threw everything he had at him in one massive blow. There was no avoiding this one. Varjak had to meet it head on. Goodness. He breathed out. 2, 3, 4, went deep into his circle. The power rose within him, and when Julius came, the circle held true. Varjak turned the blow away, using his brother's own strength against him. Julius went stumbling to the ground. Varjak grinned. It felt good. Better than the time he fought Razor. It was better than anything, a hot, intoxicating glow that pulsed through every fibre of his being. He'd never felt so alive. Julius was off balance now, weak and exposed. Finish him, thought Varjak, right now. Let loose the energy. He'll never fight again. Do it. No. Enough, said Varjak Paw. Enough and no more. Julius shook his head. I'm only just beginning, he panted. Insect. Julius flung himself through the air, out of control. Claws splayed. Varjak leaned away in slow time. Crash! Julius smashed headfirst into the fireplace, looked at Varjak with small green eyes clouded by black ash. Tried to stand up. Couldn't. It was over. Varjak Paw! Cried Jasmine. Varjak Paw! The family hailed his conquest. Varjak Paw! Varjak Paw! Varjak Paw! He closed his eyes. The victory tasted sweet, like cinnamon. He'd done it at last. He was a Mesopotamian blue. Varjak Paw, is that you? A gravelly voice. Varjak's heart skipped a beat. Holly? Varjak, I'm here. Chapter 30. It was Holly. Her spiky black and white fur burst into the front room. Varjak went to the door to meet her, flushed with victory, but there was a look in her mustard eyes, a look of horror, that wiped the smile off his face the moment he saw it. Varjak, it's horrible, she said. We've got to get out of here. She looked up at the thick green window, searching for a way out. What's horrible? Said Varjak, confused. It's the vanishings. This is where they've all gone. She shuddered. The man's not here and I didn't see those black cats, but there's a room upstairs with a big cage in it and hundreds of cats in it. Only lots of them aren't. She closed her eyes as if she was trying to block out the memory. Aren't what? He said, afraid of the answer. They're not alive. She looked more shaken than he'd ever seen her in the city. Sorry to interrupt you, Varjak, said Mother, but who is this? The Mesopotamian blues were all watching, even Julius. The Mesopotamian blues were all watching, even Julius licking his wounds by the fireplace. Holly, this is my family, said Varjak. Mother, father, everyone. Meet Holly. Don't worry, Holly said to them. We'll find a way out. Father frowned and turned to Varjak. I don't understand, he said. Do you know this cat? This is Holly, my friend from the outside, who I told you about. Father looked disgusted. He turned his back on her. They all turned their backs. This is not outside, said Father. Tell this cat to leave us. It felt like a slap in the face. Varjak glanced at Holly. She looked as stunned as he felt. How could you even think of it, whispered Mother. You should know better than this, sweetheart. Didn't you hear? Protested Varjak. She's going to help us get out. But we don't want to get out, said Mother. Where would we go? Who would feed us? Wait a minute, said Holly. Have you seen what's happening upstairs? If you're being fed, it's not for a good reason. Father ignored her. He just spoke to Varjak. We haven't been upstairs because of the black cats, but we know there are other cats up there too. You do, said Varjak. The gentleman brings them to the house, said Father. He feeds them not like he feeds us, not with caviar, but cheap dry food. There are sacks of it in the kitchen. He keeps them alive until... Well, we don't know exactly what happens next, but we all agree that the gentleman would never harm one of us. You're wrong, said Holly. If it's them today, it'll be you tomorrow. We're different, Father said to Varjak. We're special. We're Mesopotamian blues. As for those common cats, he shrugged. Who cares what he does to them? They're nothing. What? Said Holly, ears and whiskers bristling. Less than nothing, said Aunt Junie, as if Holly wasn't there. Come on, Varjak, let's go, said Holly. These idiots deserve everything they've got coming. Her words made Varjak shiver. He didn't know what to do or say. He looked at Mother. We know what we're talking about, sweetheart, she said in a gentle, reasonable voice. We're not going anywhere. His head was spinning. Maybe they were right and Holly was wrong. The gentleman hadn't harmed them yet. Perhaps he never would. But what about Holly, said Varjak. She's not one of us, insisted Father. Varjak looked at Holly. He looked at his family. There was a twisting, tearing feeling in his guts. He looked at Holly, the family, and Holly again. His insides were being ripped in half. It was impossible. We need you here, said Jasmine. You need me, said Varjak. Father nodded, very serious. Of course we need you, son. You're head of the family now. You can't just leave us. You beat Julius, said Jay. Julius was terrible, said Jethro. But you're the best, Varjak, said Jerome. Varjak felt proud inside, proud to be a Blue. Creak! It was the front door opening. Click, clack! Gentleman entering the house. Two sleek black cats by his shoes. Come on, urged Holly, now! She cut towards the corridor. Varjak couldn't move. His mouth felt numb like ice. He wanted to go with her, but how could he? He finally had what he always wanted. He was a proper Mesopotamian Blue at last. He couldn't ruin it. He couldn't walk away now. Holly stopped on the edge of the front room. She glanced back at him. He looked away. Shame prickled his eyes, made him blind. He couldn't meet her mustard gaze. Holly? Varjak, what's wrong? I can't. He felt it at once, her invisible barrier going up, coming between them, and he knew why, because he'd done exactly what she'd always feared her friends would do. He'd let her down at the very moment when she was trying to help. But what else could he do? I'm the worst friend in the world, he whispered. Stop, she said. Don't say another word. Varjak watched, frozen to the spot, as Holly bolted like she'd been burned, bolted away from him and towards the front door. The gentleman cats were ready for her. In a blur of blackness, moving as one, they blocked her and flung her to the floor. Varjak's awareness spun into action, taking in their smooth, sleek power, their deadly speed. He'd seen everything in the city, even the fearsome Sally Bones, but these black cats were still something else. The way they moved together so perfectly, their identical eyes, they were more like machines than anything alive. They had Holly trapped on the ground. His heart screamed at the sight, but how could he fight them both on his own? They'd destroy him like they'd destroyed the elder Paw. He turned to the family for help, but they turned away. No one could look at him. The gentleman closed the front door. He stooped down to touch one of the black cat's collars and whispered something in its ear. It left Holly with the other black cat and marched up to the front door where it stood blocking the way out. It stared at Varjak and the family with its black eyes. As its gaze fell on him, Varjak's awareness quickened with a strange, cold sensation. He took a step towards the black cat, immediately pushed him back. Varjak's hackles rose. Don't, son, said father. You're bringing us into danger. Just don't let them do what they want, said mother, and they won't hurt us. Varjak's mind was raging. After all they'd been through together, he'd let Holly down. He brought her here. He'd cost her the few moments in which she might have escaped, and now he couldn't even help her because that would harm his family, and there was no way he could do that. He wanted to be a Blue. He was a Blue. He belonged with them, not her, them. He looked on powerless as the other black cat dragged Holly up the stairs. She went without a struggle. There was no fight left in her. Varjak watched, silent, unable to move. The last thing he saw was the tip of her tail vanishing from view. It was like watching his own heart being torn out. She was gone. The gentleman went upstairs after her. The black cat who'd been guarding them followed at last, leaving Varjak alone with the family again. That's my son, said father. I knew you'd do the right thing, said mother. What an ugly cat that little cat she was, said cousin Jasmine. Her voice sounded like milk. Sour milk.